For the panel today, in no particular order, but first I'm going to introduce Trisha Gelman, who's the CMO at Box. She's a 3-time CMO. She was previously with Adobe, spent a long time at Salesforce. Yeah, come on up. Brought Drift into wherever you want. Drift and Checker, just to name a few. Next is Lena Waters. We are the first, I think, hearing from her as she joins Notion as CMO. She is, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but 12 days in. Prior to that, she was CMO at Grammarly, another incredible brand. And she spent 6 years prior to that at DocuSign through their largest portion of growth. So again, incredible. Sydney Sloan. You're clapping, and I didn't tell you how good she is yet. But Trisha and Sydney are both previous EIRs with the program to give you a sense of talent. In addition to this, she was also at Salesforce and Adobe, though I think at different times than Trisha. Drata, Alfresco, so if I counted right, 4-time CMO. Oh, Salesloft.
Well, she was at Drift.
Yes, at the same time. And then currently CMO at G2, which I know is so critical for so many of the brands in this room. And then definitely, not finally, but Julie Newman, who has recently joined the portfolio as head of marketing CMO at Honeycomb, one of the portfolio companies. Another, we can sit too, another big list. TrustRadius, Testio, Accenture Interactive, BigCommerce, Yahoo. It is not a small list of brands. One thing that's interesting about this group, though, if you were to all pull up their LinkedIn and get to know them, even though there's a number of brands here, one thing that I think has been really important as I look at the CMOs in this group, and many that are successful, they each have experiences where they were at brands for multiple years, and not 1 or 2 or 3, but 5, 6, 7, 8 with some really well-known brands. And I think that experience, very similar to what we just heard from Databricks, having that longevity, I think really matters, and so excited to hear from them today. I am gonna do a little talking as we get going. And I just wanna show off one of the portfolio companies, Bland. Craig mentioned how fast things are changing, and you get this rare experience as an EIR to work with your peers. I'm never at a company where there's 2 CMOs, but here at Scale, I was able to work with Trisha. It was my first time ever being able to sit next to a CMO and do the same job. And it's incredible, but your ability to absorb change is greater because you're just playing off of each other. But last August, we announced Bland as a new portfolio company. And they came to us. We normally go out to the portfolio companies. Many of you may have experienced this, where we say, here's the template for the announcement and what can we do to help you with press. But they came in with a very different perspective. They said, hey, this is where we want help. These are the outlets we want to be promoted to. This is the message that we want to bring. We want to be provocative, very thoughtful. We want to have a video. They were going to go live with a demo video. And it was this, Craig likes to call it midlife crisis moment, but this, it created this moment where we saw with that precision, not just because they were AI, but because of their precision in execution, the conciseness of message, the way they went out to market, a demo video received 7.3 million views. And that's what you're seeing here. On top of that, this is one social channel. It was way more than this. And if we were to watch the video, we'd hear them articulate the value of their product in such an amazing way, and then bring people in so all of these people wanted to watch the demo video. And that was enough to say, hey, the marketing landscape's changing. It's not that all these things are dead and penetrated. You can really come out and have people pay attention to you. But last September, a month later, we had a group of CMOs, I think some of you were in the room, that they spoke at the Bland head of marketing spoke at Dreamforce, and the group of CMOs that were in the room started asking questions. How many MQLs did you get from this? What was the ROI? How did you do attribution? And this amazing marketer, but who had never created a funnel before, had never had to answer those questions, roughly said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it doesn't matter. We have more demos than we can do in 2 months, and nobody's asking me questions. We're just going to keep doing more of this. And it really hit me as this time that marketing is changing, that we all have to rethink that playbook, and that is what got us to this presentation today. Every day we're trying to challenge ourselves and thinking different. We're throwing the playbook in the trash, and that's what we're trying to highlight in here. And we're going to hear from some of the people that I think are doing that, and that Scale thinks are doing that in an amazing way. But I don't want you to take my word for it. That's one experience. So I'm going to actually pass it to Sydney, who is going to share a little bit more on the data side to support that point that things have really changed.
Yeah, one of the cool things about being at G2 is not only, do we get to help founders, which is what I love, but we get to see how categories are shaping, and there's never been any time as transformational as now. And so this is just like, I asked the team to do a quick snapshot. We have a 3-person team that all they do all day long is look for new AI startups and new products. And so we think of AI in 2 ways. There's either AI embedded in existing or AI first. And so it's busy, folks. It is busy, busy, busy. So there are 41 AI categories, which is up 28% year over year. Over 3,000 products, up 60% year on year. And by seeing that that's already being utilized by the number of reviews that have been left, it's almost 80,000 reviews on those products. But what I found even more interesting, and I know they didn't put the slide in, so I'm just going to cheat off of my my slides, is that when you look year on year to see which categories are actually exploding, last year, AI image generators were the fastest growing at 3,450%. Then it was AI chatbots at 16,000%, AI code generators, 800%, synthetic media, and generative AI infrastructure. That was last year. This year, the fastest growing categories are LLMs, number 1, at 218. So the pace of change is a little bit less. AI chatbots are still up there at 174. AI content creation, image generators, and then code generation. So even the kind of categories are flipping. So yes, it's an AI-first world, and I think the most fun is the opportunity for these tools to disrupt existing incumbents. And so my advice is, if the big incumbents aren't reimagining and disrupting themselves, then they will be disrupted.
Perfect. So we have this changing landscape. We have the tools that we use as CMOs different. We're going to talk about some what we're calling new rules. And we're going to kick off with brand. I think the best way I could show some of the change is just with an example. And so this is what we often see for, and it's not to this brand that it's particular, but this is what we often see for a website. It says AI. We may talk a little bit here about AI washing. It says intelligent. It has a simple call to action, maybe an image highlighting some logos. This is a website that they had, I think, less than a year ago. If we look at how that looks, this website for the same brand looks today, it's radically different. You could take the AI off of this website. You could take the words intelligent and AI, and you would still know that this is a brand pushing forward. And so whether you're an established brand or a new brand, I think there is change that is happening with how we bring ourselves forward, with what that looks like. And I wanted to open that up to the panel with how you're thinking about your brands. Maybe we start with Trisha, just at Box, such a well-known brand, and how you're rethinking things.
Yeah, it's interesting because at lunch, I was talking with some people at the table, and they were asking, well, Box has been around for a long time, so how are you thinking about what you're doing? And essentially, we're disrupting ourselves. So Aaron, as still our co-founder, he's a CEO, and he, luckily for us, is a big AI thought leader. And so it's not just AI washing, but like we have to actually prove to people that what we have to offer is something compelling, interesting, and differentiated. And we basically have to resell to every single customer that we have and the market, because we're not in a situation where people don't know who Box is. but actually what they know of us is something totally different. So we have to rebuild our brand and actually rebuild the story around who we are.
And then Julie, I know Honeycomb is earlier in stage than Box. So are you considering the same? How much are you putting into brand versus maybe traditional demand channels?
Yeah, so we're really leaning in hard to brand, and I think part of that is because we're a very brand-built go-to-market to begin with. We were the creators of our category with observability, and want to make sure that we're constantly staying on the front cutting edge of that, so that we're positioning ourselves as innovators, and that means AI, but it means AI in a really authentic way. So I think where we've seen stuff with some of our competitors in the observability space, it's very much that AI washing, right? So kind of like coming in their legacy brands that had come up through an older category called APM, and they are starting to take that and try to sort of find, I think, like there was a press release that went out from one of them that was like, oh, hey, we're the first ones that are doing DeepSeek. They're like, well, I mean, are you though? It turns out that was just a press release. And then that's how the product team found out they were supposed to build a new agent to do that, versus is it really embedded in who you are? And is this part of how you're thinking about building product, how your product helps people with AI? I think that's another thing we really think about, but in a really authentic and human way. So like real examples, being able to like go to market with that and not just putting the words on the homepage. Like this is such a great example with the website. Like you said, you could take AI off of that and you know what this brand is doing. We're doing a website refresh right now, and as we're doing that, starting to think about how do we just incorporate this more in the look and feel and not even just what we're saying.
Sydney, I know you talked about, I mean, your buyer is changing every day because of the change. How are you thinking about the buyer differently, and then that impacts brand? How is that changing?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we know, the world of SEO is changing if you're sitting in a marketer's seat. And so how that world has changed, it has gone just in the last year to 25% of searches for products start in a chatbot or a chat in an LLM, and so if you haven't figured out and you know what AIO is, writing for AIO versus SEO, you're not showing up in those search results. And some of the interesting things about that in terms of like, well, how do those things work? Like, how do you know if it's showing up or not? It's going on authority. So you want to have thought leadership, authority. They're favoring, again, PR, believe it or not. So because they've indexed on the media teams, now writing for Forbes and for Fast Company and all these companies that allow you to be a contributing editor are showing up in the LLMs. And so it's something that we track. We're using a company called Profound. And so we can see for G2 when those impressions are coming up. And so now it's this like balance. It's not that Google search is going away. There's actually 9%. We just presented this to our board. Google search is actually up 9%, but click-throughs are down 25 because Gemini is answering it. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about, okay, what is the authority that I want to have around the space that my company plays in, and how does my brand show up when people are doing these types of searches? And so we have to rethink. We have to completely rethink it.
Lena, are you okay if I ask that brand question for you as we get into message in a second? Because I think you have an amazing perspective here, even just a few days in. So the next thing that we're thinking about or rethinking is messaging. And here, that company brand that I talked about, here's their website. You see some similarities between what we just saw with the last company and this one, very interactive. But there is something in AI to super concise messaging and very clear on ICP. We heard that just previously from Databricks, but it has to be because of the crowded landscape. You can't just have a word soup. And I know you're seeing some of that not just on a website, but here's an example of a billboard. What are you seeing, Lena?
Well, it's like Rick said, if you don't have your messaging right at the very beginning, it's really hard to think about amplifying, and how you amplify is changing so much, moving around from paid to more owned and earned, as we talked about. What's interesting now is you drive down 101, and this is not just my opinion, the social media post. I'm sure this ad is very relevant for a certain segment of the audience, but maybe not the general population. And I think we're seeing this more and more, is that there's these very obscure messages that are happening as these AI-first companies try and build their brand, which makes sense if you really want to exhibit your technical chops and be part of the AI conversation. But it is very difficult to have that messaging transition into a brand that people will actually understand and internalize. And so, I think part of the mission that Notion's been on specifically is to think about how to make that very distinct, very ownable. How do you think about the design and the message that you're really trying to get across, and how does that create differentiation for your brand? And one of the things that that we look at now is this concept of how do you take AI and put it into the hands of the builders? And so this concept of think it, make it at Notion, which is a newer part of their brand that they're starting to put out now, is really starting to think about what this is going to mean for the buyers who internalize it and the users. And there is this difference between a large company that's remaking their brand, a startup company who is trying to establish it. And what I've experienced at both Notion and at Grammarly, at DocuSign for that matter, is when you have individual users using your brand, especially as we just saw in that last example on the website, get right in there, start using the product. People are now bringing that to work. And I think the demographic shift that we're starting to see from the buyers means that consumerization of IT, where you used to bring your own phone to work, now you're bringing your own applications to work. And as people start to build more using AI and get the outcomes that they want, I think we're going to start to see that more and more. And it's really important that comes through to the message, which will then solidify within the brand.
I think that goes to the point that you were saying before, and that the Databricks team was talking about is who is your audience? I think for us at Box, the audience it's the same, but it's changed in terms of being broader and wider. And for AI, it's definitely developers, because the developers are mostly the ones who are out there trying to solve the problem for their business today. And they're out there getting permission to license some technology, go try something, do something, whatever. And then it's coming up. Whereas as a general business app before, we weren't really targeting that audience as much. And now, because it's workflow, it's AI, it's just a totally different group of people.
The bottoms up has made it so much faster.
Yeah, but it means that as marketers, we have to move so much faster as well, because AI is moving so fast, and the people that are consuming it are looking at new things every day.
Not a tops-down sale anymore.
Yeah, it's the sandwich. I would say it's a sandwich.
Just real quick on the messaging piece, Fast Company said that the iteration of how we've personalized AI at Notion, they said it's as if Microsoft Clippy grew up drinking dirty martinis and reading New Yorker cartoons, which is nice. But there's this I think uniqueness that matters to the personalization of IT of AI, where it used to sort of belong to a very technical group, and I think we're going to see this exactly going broader and wider, where now that AI has become something that anybody can use and it's in the hands of everyone, and you can start using someone's product right from the homepage of their website, this really opens up the possibilities for everything. And I think as marketers, it's going to be incumbent on us to think about how we personalize the AI in terms of benefits and impacts and outcomes for the customer, not just technically about what it can do. And we're not quite seeing that yet, but I think we're right in the midst of it.
I think there's a challenge here, because Rick was right. When you build your message, it has to persist long enough that people can remember it, and then 7 times 7 ways, that's how I learned it. And yet the industry is changing so quickly. And so how do you think about building a message that can last for even a year when there's so much disruption in there? And so I think that means you have to lean into your vision a little harder. You have to have that aspiration. You have to talk about not just what the product does today, but what it can do, and figure out how to find that resonance with the user or the buyer. I always like to start with the user, because if you do, then you really understand the value they're getting, and then you can elevate that. But I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Because you could be like, I just did my quarter, my first quarter, I nailed my message, and then somebody else comes out with a competing message, a competing product, and you have to test yourself, am I going to try and change it? And if so, then the timer starts over again. Then you have to recreate for the next year. So I think that's something we're all going to have to like really figure out, like how do we get the message right that it can sustain disruption.
Yeah, I think that also on that, it's so noisy, right? Like if you put out a message at 8 a.m., it's like buried already by like 2 p.m. So you have to really figure out like what message matters. Like I think more so than ever before, it's not just having a consistent message, but a message that matters to people. And I would say like that's something that at Box, like we've really positioned our message differently now. Like when I joined the company like 7 months ago, they were talking about the future of work and how the future of work is about like this new way that people like collaborate and work together. It's interesting, the two of us sitting up here on like document collaboration. But the future of work has been consumed by like an entirely different conversation about like, are people going into the office? Is it hybrid? Is it not? Whatever. And I'm like, we cannot say this is our message anymore. Like we will die on the vine. We cannot reposition the company and maintain this message. It's just not the right message.
I think that's why marketing is becoming so much more closer to the mission and the vision of the founder. That's the thing that's going to be sustaining. And when we talk about things like category creation, that's why. There's got to be some sort of bedrock and some sort of foundation that the company can attach their brand to, so that if the messaging does need to change, ideally not too much at the highest levels, but there's really something about putting the purpose of the company out there for people to hold on to, because you can't keep changing everything. We'll never get the memory.
I'm going to move to the next. We could talk about messaging for the entire session. When I mentioned this morning, but when I think about marketing, I think there's the people that you market to, there's the content you bring to them, and then the channels you bring that through. As marketers, we spend a lot of time thinking about the channels. People want to talk about the trade shows. You heard that earlier with Rick. The couple of things that have already been mentioned here. You can't have a conversation in marketing without measurement, without mentioning this. Here's an example from HubSpot where they're seeing 80% decline in their blog traffic. I mean, the rules are changing. It is not the same. Sydney had mentioned that. We see this. I'm going to pass this to Sydney, but this is just, when we were preparing for this deck, I almost fell out of my chair when I saw this.
Yeah, I mean, we were just, for those of us who were just at the Forrester conference, they also ran a survey, and it was the same. And if you haven't yet tried to inquire for your product as a buyer would, I highly encourage you to do so and to see what results come through, who are the authorities, consider like influencers. Like influencers in B2B are a real thing. Because they're indexed, because they have high followers, and that's and so how to think about, now I have to write my content and think about how my content is distributed through these new mediums. I'm presenting at SaaStr. We do an annual buyer behavior survey, and one of the other interesting things about this isn't necessarily a channel, but more on the buyer side, is that there is a tension, I would say, where is the pendulum going to swing back for AI-based tools to IT centralized purchasing? Because they want to have control over what algorithms are within the AI tools that they're going to be using. And so it takes me back many decades to like, oh, now we're going to be, creating bespoke workflows, and everybody's going to do a build your own. And so does that change in terms of who the buyer is going to be? I hope not. I hope that RevOps can establish a relationship with IT, so go-to-market organizations can still manage and maintain their own stack. But that's going to also be interesting, is like not only where are they searching, but who is doing the searching. Does your buyer change?
As it relates to channels, and I want to leave it to the panel to decide where they want to go. Performance marketing is totally changing. SEO is totally changing. Events, I know for Sydney, she this morning was talking about an AI roadshow that they're doing. What are the other channels that are resonating, not resonating? Have you had to throw everything in the trash? Maybe we just go down the line in here. Julie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a little bit in the next section, but in addition to the events and more of these like community-based things that we're really working on, I think that making sure that you do have very authentic content that's out there, B2B influencers is a huge one, right? And we're very lucky in that we have a lot of what I would consider like internal influencers that actually work for us, and being able to take what they're doing and really elevate it. But when you think about like what is trusted, what's going to show up when people go to ChatGPT, or what are people actually going to buy these days, it feels authentic because it's not AI generated, right? Like our co-founder being on a podcast and actually having a conversation with somebody is really authentic, and being able to chop that up and use it in lots of different places. Not only is it influencing what you're going to see in the chatbots, but also that is such an authentic way to take the story out, where there's this sort of very interesting concept we talk about of like the human in the loop, where we talk about that at Honeycomb mostly, and how it works with software development on when do you want code assistant, when do you want human. But I think about it a lot in terms of marketing as well, and like where like a lot of these sources of where people are going to get information, like where the human is in this loop is quite important. And it's not just how are we getting stuff at scale quickly out the door, but also how is it really authentic, and putting that through all the channels. So yeah, like shifting much more towards brand, organic, experiential over just putting out digital ads.
Maybe just right down the line. I know everybody has different takes and what channels are working.
Yeah, I think that I'd pick like your sustainable, differentiated, owned audience through community, which are really hard to build. But I think that also will make it continues to be something that is indefensible, and how you think about treating your customers. I was just talking to Jaco from Winning by Design, and they have a conference coming up here next month, and like he's just focusing on the right hand of the bow tie. He's like, if you can be, and you can imagine Jaco, right? If you can be, if you know him, then if you're so customer obsessed that that's all you care about, it will generate net new business for you because of the peer effect, because of when they go somewhere else. And so just, I think of like having that balance between net new, and Rick, you were talking about that with like, no, let's be customer obsessed. And if we're customer obsessed in how we treat them and how we create community for them, that will give you that long-term indefensible mode.
Community is big. I think we're more likely to put $1 into a community or a user event and get that amplification than we are for third party. So there's really something to be said for owned and earned. Everybody's putting out the same kinds of ads. Performance marketing is dodgy depending on what kind of space you're in. SEO is questionable. The marketing funnel is, a little dodgy. Do MQLs matter? Do hand raisers matter? And if that's where all of your demand is going to end up, then I think you have to start bottoms up. Like you're saying, start on the right-hand side of that. So whatever experience your customer and buyer needs to have to get them through those levels of awareness and consideration and preference, figure out what that experience is, create a great message, and then maybe start from the other end. But I think those traditional channels and us sort of scratching our heads and trying to figure out exactly which channel is going to matter, that's too slow. So I think it's going to be customer focused first, and community is the big amplifier.
I agree with everybody, but I would say the influencer, podcast, et cetera, like you mentioned that the media is like really high in ranking, like if you have like your own Forbes channel, et cetera. But like, let's be real, like 5 years ago, there were 100 editors and writers at these businesses, and now there's like 20.
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't a lot of people in traditional media anymore, so whether it's like high ranking or not, like you have to go find where people are actually reading stories and getting their information. And specifically for developers, they're going to X, they're going to go learn about AI and what they're doing in the social platforms, and there are micro-influencers and macro-influencers, and like whoever makes sense for you. I think we've been putting a lot of money and building out the entire team about like going after that strategy, and that team is my former PR and comms team. Like they know, like they still do like the traditional media because it's not 100% dead, and we're lucky that we have like a great thought leader in Aaron Levy to like just go on CNBC and like punch way above our weight. But I mean, in the end of the day, like we need to reach a high volume of people. And so doing that through the influencers that are reaching our more business-oriented people is important, and then like a whole different group of people that are influencers in the developer market. And we don't have, outside of Aaron, a lot of followers. So I think like the more you can kind of do that content motion, maybe your blog is going down, but like what is that content motion and how are you building the authority of your own voice of content? How are you educating the market? I think it's a really big opportunity to go back to the roots of like building that community around educating. Like it's kind of the HubSpot playbook from like how many years ago? Like 15 years ago almost, of like educate people on being the best marketers is basically what they did. And they just like put out tons of content and it wasn't even about what they did. They didn't even have a marketing platform at the time. They actually started with like a core CRM for sales. But I mean, doing that and filling that void to help people, and then that creates positive resonance with your brand.
I think the one thing I'll say is that there's winners in all of these channels and people that find a way. That first example with Bland, I mean, they had millions of views of a demo video. If you had said, oh, my strategy for this launch is a demo video, I'd say you're not going to get anywhere. They proved us wrong. When Rick talked about trade shows, I agree that, and I talk to Craig about this all the time, so he's hearing me, but there's a winner at every trade show. If I could choose any of you, we could walk around a trade show and there's one or two brands that stand out above every other brand. And our job, if we want to win, is to be that one or two brands and let every other company in the room pay for our marketing. And that applies in digital channels, that applies in events. And so I don't think any of these channels, kind of to your point, Tricia, are necessarily dead, but you can't do all of them, and you have to figure out a way to be the winner in the one that you do. And if you can, paired with this next point of community, I think that's the only way you can stand out, given the scary numbers that you shared, Sydney, at the beginning. Like, it is just terrifying if you don't find that way to stand out. On the community, this is one example from a portfolio company, Clarity. They have leaned so much, very much like G2's doing with their upcoming roadshow. This is not about the event itself. It is about creating community with chief accounting officers, and they have done a great job standing out with those chief accounting officers and creating that community. I know you were last week at the Google Cloud conference and saw some examples of that.
Yeah, I thought this one was so interesting as we kind of think about how the audiences are evolving, and it's like, hey, you have like developers and the end user and being able to come bottoms up. I spent some time talking to the Rootly CEO, and so this big thing they've done is this AI lab, right? And all of these things, you know, when we talked about the concept of AI washing and just sort of like throwing stuff out there, the way you get to developers is letting them get their hands on stuff, right? And showing them real things. So I think like 4 weeks ago, MCPs were the hotness. I don't know. This is a room of go-to-market folks. So if you don't know, it's sort of like a USB-C port for LLMs and like hooking your product up, right? And so they instantly jumped on this. And it was funny being at Google, A2A had just come out, which is their version of that protocol, and MCP had already made it out to market like 2 weeks before. And so the fact that they're, you know, immediately really has something up, people can get their hands on it. We did the same thing. We released an MCP on let people come in and play and see what's going on and really develop that bottoms up. We have a lot of the folks on our team that really speak to the developer are, again, in the community, involved in open source, really working